broadcasting from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPTA 20, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome to the Gaily Show, the only daily LGBTQ radio news and talk show in the United States. I'm your host, John Parker. It is Friday, and we end our weeks talking about culture and entertainment because LGBTQ artists, writers, filmmakers, and theater makers are one of the most censored groups in America today. So every week we want to be lifting up their work for you to read and to watch and to attend. What is on the show today? In the second half hour, Mary E. Roach will be here to talk about her new romance novel, adult romance novel, her first, We Are the Match. Up first, Lana Lynn is a writer, artist, and filmmaker based in New York and Connecticut. She is the author of the books Freud's Jaw and Other Lost Objects, Fractured Subjectivity in the Face of Cancer. Her film and video works include the Cancer Journals Revisited, her various works and collaborative projects with Thao Lam as Lynn plus Lamb have been exhibited at festivals and art and educational spaces throughout the world, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney, the New Museum, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. That's just a partial list, folks. Her new book, The Autobiography of H. Thao Lam, is out now. Hello, Lana. Welcome to the Gaily Show.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to the show.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's start with what folks can expect when they turn to page one.
Well, at heart, the autobiography of H. Thao Lam is a queer love story, and I situate it between memoir, social criticism, and conceptual art. And one of its defining features is I use the literary form that Gertrude Stein invented in the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, in which she uses her life partner, Alice, as a kind of mouthpiece to tell her own story. But I kind of narrate the chronicle of my own and my partner's lives through my partner Lantao's voice.
It is quite the Gertrude Stein's book is, kind of like a woo, how are we doing this here? And it's really lovely to see and we're going to get into that, your book being in conversation with that one. I just want to say, because I loved it so much in the first chapter, The Memory of the Mango was delightful, both in the writing, but also the humor and suffusion of love in it. So that was just something that I was like, oh, I love that part.
Thank you.
And it's in the beginning, so folks, you have that to look forward to when you get started on page one. Given how policed queer books are and whether or not you can find them in bookstores or not, I'm always curious about how these books find their way to our guests. And so I'm really curious to find out how the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas by Gertrude Stein found its way to you.
Somebody else asked me that, and I was never assigned it in school, but of course somehow it just seeped in through the culture that I knew who Gertrude Stein was. And I distinctly remember that the statue was installed at Bryant Park of Gertrude Stein, and I made a pilgrimage there. And I think I've always been attracted more to the mythology of Stein and Toklas's lesbian relationship and its many years of devotion. And then I was just very fascinated by this book, with this very unique device of kind of channeling oneself through another person.
Mm-hmm. In the first chapter, you talk about how you and Lantao are there aren't very many similarities, right, between you and Alice and Gertrude. So why use that particular book? I mean, was it just the framing of it? Because you are in conversation with it throughout your own book. So talk to me about that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it is an homage to the book, although I'm not like a huge scholar or necessarily fan of Stein's oeuvre, but this precise book, how it kind of documents their relationship. As I said, I was kind of more interested in their relationship than necessarily her literary production. But this way in which you can voice it through another person was really what got to me. And then I really wanted to push back against it as well as honoring it, and to sort of underscore what's missing in their narrative. They become emblematic of modernism and the arts, with the literary salon, and the Asian presence is really pushed to the understory in Stein's work. And Monique Trung, the novelist, had already written a book of Salt in which she kind of fictionalizes Stein and Toklas's Asian servant into the cook that she calls Bin. So yeah, I'm kind of pushing back against their celebrated mode of salon living, while at the same time I honor it.
Right. Maybe we should, for folks who don't know who Gertrude Stein and the Literary Salon, can you give a little bit about who Gertrude was?
I'm not going to do as good a job as the historians, of course, but she was celebrated for having these Saturday evening dinners with the likes of Picasso and Alfred Whitehead, and the salon was filled with modernist art, and Stein actually sat for Picasso and the portrait of Stein, and became very famous and was hung in the room where they had dinner, and people would talk and argue about the paintings. And the book Autobiography of Alice B. Toklas is very much a kind of compendium of gossip, of art gossip amongst the great Cubist and Surrealist painters and writers, Hemingway included amongst them, and Fitzgerald. Yeah.
I'm talking with Lana Lin, author of the autobiography of H. Lan Thao Lam, which was longlisted for the 2025 National Book Award in Nonfiction. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Lana will have a reading for our listeners in Chicago. There will be a reading at the Women and Children First bookstore in Chicago on Thursday, November 6th. We will include a link to Lana's website where you can find all the information. Of course, you can also just Google Women and Children First Book First website. Goodness, it is the end of the week and I just can't talk today. All right, this is maybe a too obvious question, but you and Lan Thao are a creative team. Was it the same in the writing of this book?
No, I claim sole authorship, but with the blanket permission from Lan Thao to make a work of art out of our lives. And they understood that artistic license is needed, and that I wasn't really after the idea of authenticity or verisimilitude. And they understand the artistic process. So they basically said, you go at it, and gave me full license.
So when was the first time they read it?
They actually read it quite a long way into the process. I had done a full draft and even worked one pass with the editor. But before it was going to go out into the world, they were going to have their eyes on it.
I'm curious what the viewpoint unlocked for you, right? So I've interviewed Carmen Marie Machado about her book In the Dream House, and she said this book didn't work until I wrote it in the second person. And I've talked to Nancy Gabian, who her book The Fear of Large and Small Nations, where she said I was trying to write it as a memoir, but it just it didn't work until I had that third person narrative going on there. For you, what unlocked using the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas?
It is actually that unlocking was being able to write about myself in the third person, and uniquely through the point of view of my partner. It gives it both a kind of distance, but also an extreme intimacy. And I think that one can get closer to difficult subjects when you tend to take a step back and write it in the third person. So I could be a little more sympathetic about my child self.
This is essentially a double autobiography. In the book, you cover a lot of topics: photography, cancer, tropical fruit, Eve Sedgwick's eyeglasses. And then there's already a challenge, I think, when I talk to, nonfiction writers and memoirs specifically about which topics they're going to choose, which events they're going to choose within their books, within just a single memoir. But here you have a double autobiography. So I'm curious about your process of analyzing topics and events from both of your pasts and current presents to include in the book. I mean, what was that like?
I mean, here's where I did use the Stein as a kind of a structure that helped because I used Stein's chapter titles, chapter headings as kind of containers. And she has before I came to Paris, and I would have before I came to New York. So with what she had in Paris, I had in New York, and then she has a certain time period of the war, and she's referring to World War I, and I have the war, meaning the Vietnam-US war. So that helped to sort of put things in buckets. And then I wanted to also kind of follow suit in a certain way with Stein, where Stein is really addressing some really big world events, but also very daily, quotidian gossip, as I said. And I don't do so much gossip in my book, but I was interested in putting really large world events next to seemingly inconsequential events or anecdotes. As you mentioned, like Eve Sedgwick's eyeglasses, the queer literary theorist's eyeglasses, next to September 11th.
I am talking with Lana Lin, author of the autobiography of H. Lan Thao Lam. I have to fit in a quick break here. We're going to have more with Lana when we come back. You're listening to The Gaily Show on AM 950 Radio, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk. Stay tuned. More after this quick break. Welcome back to the Gaily Show. I'm John Parker. We are coming up on the bottom of the hour. The autobiography of H. Lan Thao Lam was longlisted for the 2025 National Book Award in Nonfiction. Its author, Lana Lin, is my guest right now. Lana, I read your essay in Literary Hub, and you referenced Audre Lorde and her term of biomythography, which was her way of describing the fusion of biography and mythology and history in her 1982 amazing book, Zami. In your essay on LitHub, you shared that I'm going to read the quote here, you categorize your book as autobiomythography to more explicitly name the self in a complex interplay of self, other, life, myth, history, and writing, end quote. Let's unpack that.
Oh my goodness. You refer to my own words, so that's exactly how I refer to it. I mean, I'm very inspired by Lorde's biomythography, but I did want to call attention to also calling into question the self and the auto aspect. But like Maxine Hong Kingston, like Audre Lorde, I'm incorporating material that could typically be overlooked or excised in traditional autobiography, like myth and dreams and misremembered memories, hearsay, and the speculative. So it's kind of all intertwined with drawing some attention to what we think of as, nonfiction.
I'm curious about in 2025, we're going through a particular moment right now. I'm curious for you being able to then look back at the Vietnam War and the impacts that it had on both of your lives. And now looking at it, though, from the year of 2025, I mean, as you were looking at and writing about that, including that in your book, was there anything that came up for you that you were surprised about in terms of writing the war? the impacts of it?
Well, looking at it when I was writing about it, in my book, the chapter after the war comes after the chapter on the Vietnam War, but I don't specify which war when I say after the war. And so in my mind, I was writing in 2020, it was kind of after the almost not a defined race war, but the Black Lives Matter protests, the COVID, anti-Asian hate. So I feel like that's what was informing that moment. And I mean, thinking about it now, and it's only 5 years later, I think about the Vietnam War in relation to the war in Gaza. This very long history of settler colonialism and violence that we are all living through.
Coming back to your Lit Hub essay, you talk about the cover of your book. Can you share the origins of it and how it's also in conversation with the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas?
The cover of
your book.
Yeah, of my book that I wrote about in Lit Hub is a kind of homage to the 1933 first edition of the autobiography of Alice B. Toklas, with a photo taken by Man Ray of Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas. Gertrude at her writing desk and Alice coming in through the door. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I had noticed sitting in our Connecticut old former sawmill that there was this kind of architectural resonance between the Stein and Alice photo and our own humble abode.
I'm here with Lana Lin, author of the autobiography of H. Lan Thao Lam, which was longlisted for the 2025 National Book Award in Nonfiction. Lana, for our Chicago listeners, Lana will have a reading at the Women and Children First Bookstore on Thursday, November 6th. You can just Google Children First Bookstore and you can find the times for that. I believe it starts at 7 p.m. I am curious about the conversation or the interplay, the differences of your queer relationship and the relationship that Alice and Gertrude have in theirs. I mean, there could be similarities. They couldn't, there obviously are very clear differences between the two of those lives. Can you talk about that queer conversation that you're having between looking at your lives and then looking back at the descriptions of Alice and Gertrude's lifelong?
Yeah, I mean, Alice and Gertrude were very collaborative in their life, although they really mimicked certain hetero conventions. Gertrude Stein referred to Alice as her wife. Gertrude was pretty much the genius artist, and Alice was her helper and cook and typist. But there was really more of a collaborative element that was not really acknowledged publicly. Thao and I are very publicly a collaboration. We do make collaborative work together on equal footing. This particular book is collaborative, but it is a solo author book. It's a different kind of venture, but we each have our own solo art practices, and But so I would hope that we have a little more of a balanced relationship.
There was a really lovely review of your book published in Extra by H. Felix Chow Bradley. I'd like to read a sentence of it because it really stood out for me. And going through the book as your book, reading it as well, the quote is, "Lin's text is more subtle, more concerned with the intimacy of mundane details, of how those details, especially the shared ones, slowly, miraculously accumulate into a 25-year romantic and artistic partnership." I loved that sentence. What are your thoughts and reactions to that and hearing that description of your book and how you were writing the mundane details, so to speak?
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, and I didn't want to make it seem like I was trying to conflate like these global crises with the everyday. every day, so seemingly inconsequential, is more to say that the matter of our everyday lives is important, and just to value it. And that those 25 years are an accumulation of these very minor, interactions. So yeah, that review is so great. And also I think really gratifying to hear that the reviewer was saying the book is in conversation with the past, and a way to give critical commentary about the past, but while also valuing the past.
The book is The Autobiography of H. Lan Thao Lam. We have links for you to order your own copy in our show notes and on our websites, am950radio.com and heartlandsignal.com. You can connect with Lana at lanalin.com, LANALIN.com. Thank you, Lana, so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much, John. What a pleasure.
All right, we are going to take a quick break here, but we have more literary goodness to talk about.